to do original work, it's not necessary to know something that nobody else knows. It's necessary to believe something that few others believe. I found this quote on the web. I was kind of looking around on one of these pages that has inspirational quotes. This is from Mark Anderson, I think most famous for Netscape, being part of Netscape. I'll put a link in the description to his Twitter if you want to check him out. And this was a tweet. And it made me think for a second, because we've been talking a lot about style and being creative. And I think this tweet is probably more targeted towards business, because that seems to be the focus there. But it also makes sense being creative and being a good business person or an entrepreneur is to be a creator, right? On a lot of levels. I think sometimes we try to categorize, or we think about being a creator as, well, I make art in some way or another. I paint or I draw or I do music. But being an entrepreneur, being anything that is pulling something out from nothing, creating something, right? That's what makes you a creator. So I thought this was just a very interesting thing, because when we think of being an artist in style, we think of originality, or at least I do. One of the things that you'll hear me say, and many people probably that show and teach and talk about photography and art, we'll talk about following trends, and we'll talk about sameness. I talked about this last episode. And this is not necessarily a bad thing. And I want to be clear there. I don't want to come off as saying if you do things that are trendy, it's bad. But if we want to be original, if we want to be known or successful or to break out, we've got to do something different. But why do we want to do that? I guess is the first thing. So I'm going to break this down a little bit. I think we're going to talk about being original in this episode, and we'll talk a little bit about it. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this. You could leave a message using the Anchor app. There's a link in the description. And of course, you can email me at avoice@gmail.com. But let's get into this. Why do we want to be original is the first thing we want to tackle here. Because if we don't know why we want to be original, it's going to be hard for us to figure out the how part of it, right? Why is often very important, and something we should ask ourselves a lot. Part of being original is asking why. Why are we doing this? Why are we even creating? And if we decide that we have a good reason to create, then why do we want to be original? Why not just do what everybody else does? There's certain benefits to doing what everybody else does. We know that if we photograph a rainbow reflection when that's trendy, that it'll get likes. We know that if we photograph kittens, that'll probably get likes. But do we really want to do that because that's inside of us, something we want to say, or are we just doing that to get the likes? And that might be a good enough reason. But if your reasoning for creating is to just simply get the likes in the moment, then being original might not be the way to do that. It might not be the way to step out. Of course, if you're original enough that people start copying you and you make the trend, that's a whole other thing. But here we go. Why do we want to be original? One of the first reasons, and the most obvious, is commercial or artistic success. I kind of touched on that a little bit there. If you are original and stand out, people will seek you out commercially to work with you. In an ideal world, you don't want people who are working with you just because you're doing what everybody else does and you happen to be the closest to them or the cheapest, which is often the reason why some people get jobs. You want to be the person that they're like, we want that style. If we think about, I was reading an article or an interview, it was a little bit older, with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he was talking about his acting career and how he, everybody was looking a certain way or whatever, and he looked so different. And because of that, he never really auditioned for anything. People either used him because they wanted that look, or they didn't. It was an all or nothing. He was unique. He was a big bodybuilder, right? Versus, most other actors, which weren't like that at the time. So he really stuck out. He was original. Now, did that mean that it probably limited some of his options? Sure. But having a lot of options for mediocrity is not always as good as having a few options for being unique and stand out and to be at the top of your game. And again, also artistic success. That might fall into the category of when people start saying, oh yeah, you're doing this in this style. Oh, that's like such and such's style. Oh, I'm shooting like this person. When people come to you and they show you work, one of the greatest things ever, it doesn't happen as much as I'd like, is when somebody pulls an image like offline and they show it to me as something they want to do, and it's something that I shot and they don't even realize it. They just found a cool image they liked and it was my shot. So, I think that's just such a cool feeling, because it's like, well, yeah, because there's all kinds of stuff, right? We have people come to us all the time pulling great images off and showing us, hey, we want to do something like this. Inspiring people by doing something unique that stands out is such a great feeling. And that's artistic success, versus commercial success. Obviously, you can be commercially successful as an artist as well. And this falls into the idea of being remembered. We want to have people remember our work. Ideally, remember us, so they hire us, but remember our work. See something and be like, wow, I saw this image a long time ago. Or when somebody says, what's your favorite image you've ever seen? And they pull up an image and it's yours, right? You want images that people are going to remember, not just pass by and double click so they get a heart, but an image they screenshot or they look at and want to emulate, an image that inspires them to create. These are the things we want, somebody to remember. Rembrandt is sitting up there, in the afterlife going, wow, I'm glad everybody remembers me when they wanted to use that lighting. And we can't underestimate the idea of just feeling unique, feeling like you are special. I think a lot of times, many of us, if we're working kind of regular jobs, as we like to call it, we are one of many doing something that many are doing. And yes, we might be good at our job. We might be happy in our job. We might really love our job, but we're still one of many. When we create our art, this is our opportunity to be one of one, to be 100% unique, to stand out and to show what's inside of us. The art gives us this ability. And this is one reason why being original is great, because then we're really showing us. When we look at a bunch of work, let's say we look and we say, oh, right now smoke bombs are really popular and everybody's getting a lot of views, so I'm going to do smoke bombs. We might actually really want to do smoke bombs. We might like smoke bombs. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But if our identity then falls into the smoke bomb category, so there was this, and I'm going to name any names, but there was a photographer that really did this amazing work with gels, probably like 5-6 years ago, really blending the gels. It was really good stuff. And I remember seeing it on Instagram, and then I've heard the first few times I was like, wow, that's really unique and really interesting. But then all of a sudden, I saw more and more people doing the same thing. They figured it out. They figured out, oh, well, it's just contrasting gels, blah, blah, blah. And they're blending them together, stuff that's next to each other on the color wheel, but not exactly. So I don't know if I can get into this technically when I'm not showing it, but, instead of using like opposites on the color wheel, they were using like the 1/3 over. So it was like it kind of was opposite, but it was close enough that it blended. And it really created unique, interesting images. Anyways, more and more people were doing it. And then I started seeing my Instagram feed filled with images like this. And eventually I went back to that person because I didn't see them popping up as much, and they were still doing the same thing. And sure, some people probably remembered them for it, but at this point now, because their entire style, and this goes into style, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, is tied into a technique, you're no longer unique even though you created it. So one thing about being original is you need to keep moving forward and changing. This is super important. This isn't part of the tweet, but you can't lock in. If you lock into one thing as your thing, as much as I joke about the Rembrandt thing, if you look at Rembrandt's paintings, they don't all have that same light. A lot of them do, but that's the lighting in it is not Rembrandt style, right? There's so much more to it than that, the way the brushstrokes, the color palette, everything else. So you don't want to lock in on one single thing as your uniqueness. But if that is something that you want to embrace, you can dive into it. Just remember though, if that person that created that style, the person that kind of started that trend, just became one of the masses, what do you think when you're the 5th or 6th person doing it? Do it, learn it, enjoy it, but don't try to stake your uniqueness on it, because you're basically doing what you saw somebody else do. It's not an original thing. So if you want to stand out and be unique and be original, you have to believe in something other people don't believe. If we go by the tweet, and part of that might be yourself, right? But how do we do that? What is the technique? Daniel, can you tell me how to be original? I think I kind of can. And I'm going to do that right now. So the first step to being original, in my opinion, is to look inside ourselves. What is it that we want to say? What is it that we believe in? Not just in the arts, but in our life. What makes us happy? What makes us angry? What makes us sad? What is it that draws emotion from us? What is it that makes us react to the world and not just go through humdrum, humdrum, humdrum? What are the things that stick out? What would What would we do if we just could do whatever we wanted to do? If it's the middle of the day and it's a Tuesday and it's sunny out, what do you really want to do? Do you want to sit in front of your computer doing the job you're doing, or is there something else you'd rather be doing? Now, I'm not saying that you should just get up and do it, but what is it? What is that thing? Imagine it in your head. Think about it. What is it that is inside of you that you want to get out there? What would you like to share with people? What is it that you feel like you know or you understand that maybe you see that other people don't? And not that you're going to run around, as I say, mansplaining things, but that you will express it through your art. And this comes into the second part. After we look into ourselves, we have to look outside ourselves. Once you understand or start to understand what it is that you want to say, what you need to do is now look at the world and see what other people are saying. See what's out there. Experience it. Go and meet unique people. Go to the part of town you never go to and eat a kind of food you never eat. Go to a movie that doesn't seem like something you'd be into. Actually stop and listen to a street performer or watch them if they're juggling or something. Don't just walk by and throw a quarter in their hat. Actually take the time to look around you and absorb the world. See what is out there. Every bit of it. Read the posters in the subway. Read the graffiti in the subway. Read a newspaper you haven't looked at in a long time. Pick up a comic book. Read a novel. Read the back of a book that's sitting in the waiting room while you're, instead of your phone. Step outside yourself. Step outside the things that are around you. Listen to a different radio station. Try to bring things that you don't normally bring into your life, and see how that clashes with or blends with what you have inside. Maybe there's something there that you're going to find that is the trigger or the path that gets the thing that you want to say out. Maybe there's something there that you're like, that's it. That's the thing I'm trying to say. How can I now say it? Other people don't see it. It's not on Instagram everywhere. This is, in an old magazine that I picked up at the barbershop. How do I now translate what's inside of me to what I've seen from the outside? And this is the third and final step. We look back inside of ourselves again. And we analyze, taking in the things that we have learned, the things that we've absorbed, and we see how that meshes with what we already had. Now think about it. It's Tuesday afternoon. It's a sunny day. What is it you want to do? Is it the same as before? Is it different? Would you handle it in a different way? This is the work you want to create. This is it. This is what you have to say. This is your uniqueness. This is your original concept. You are now going to step forward and do it. Take those things from inside you. Observe the things outside you. Bring it all back inside. And that is your unique perspective. That is your style. And that will come out as you create your work. Okay, so how do we know when we are actually being original? If it matters, right? I think when you start to accumulate or create enough work that is unique, you will know because a couple of things will happen. One is that you will get some very dedicated fans, believers, followers, whatever you want to call it, people that really like what you do. You'll find people starting to emulate what you do. And this is great, right? You're showing somebody something interesting and unique, so they're going to try to do it. And I don't mean like when I do a demo and I'm like, you put the light here. That's not a unique thing. Everybody puts the light there. But more like little subtleties in it. The way that you use color, the way that you use contrast, the way that you pose, the way that you use different colors in your paintings, let's say, or if you different techniques of brush strokes. These are the things that we're going to look at and say, well, okay, wow, I see that this is catching on. People are asking me, how did you do that? How did you do that? Because they want to know. They're interested because it's something they hadn't seen before, because it's original and unique. And in my opinion, you should share it. There's no use in being original and unique and creating something awesome if you're not going to share. That's just how I've always been. I don't have this fear. I remember being a photo assistant and working for some photographers that I may have told the story before about this one photographer that he would shoot Polaroids. So this is, I'm aging myself here, but before we had digital cameras, we would shoot like a Polaroid to show what it was going to look like. And he would look at it for the lighting to make sure it was good. And then he would tear up the Polaroid because he didn't want us to see it. He didn't want the assistants to see what the light was doing because he didn't want them to steal his techniques. Ooh. Yeah. Anyways, you wouldn't know his name if I told you now, because he wasn't doing anything unique and didn't really stand out. So there you go. Share what you've got. Create and share. Share it through the art. Share it through explaining the technique. If somebody asks you, if somebody's curious enough about your work and inspired enough about your work to ask you questions, try to take the time to answer them if you can. I mean, obviously there comes a point where if you've got a lot of followers, you're going to get tons and tons of direct messages and emails, and you can't answer them all. But try to make an effort to interact with people that are enjoying your work. This will also help you grow. Remember that whole look outside yourself? These people, they're outside yourself. So this is what we want to do. But I always say this is so I'll tell a little story here. I was at Adorama as the working as the lighting consultant. When I first went to Adorama, if people know my background, they brought me in to be like the pro. So I was like a pro who could help people with lighting and like show them before we started doing videos. And this photographer came in and he was hired to photograph the products. Like he was going to do like rolls of film and stuff, right? He was going to take pictures of it for the website. And we got it. I think there was a book up or something by a famous photographer. I can't remember how we got into the conversation. He looked at the book and he was like, wow, this guy, he's such a hack. I was using that technique, whatever, 10 years ago. And he was like so adamant that this photographer who had a book that was a hack, and really well accomplished photographer. I mean, I'm not going to get into names, whatever. And I remember that some other people are over him. Like, wow. So we went and looked at this photographer's webpage, of course, because you have to. Like, well, this guy's calling this famous photographer a hack. He must be really good. It was middle of the road, mediocre, nothing unique, real basic. And I was like, okay, so you've been using this technique of using this kind of light or whatever for 10 years or whatever, but you're still not an original. You're still not unique. You're still not, I didn't say this to the person, obviously. You haven't created anything unique or original. Just because you're using a tool or a technique or a function in your camera or a function in the computer doesn't mean you are the master of it or that you're doing anything interesting with it. You can have the best camera in the world. You can have all the software. You can have great models, and you can still create images that are not unique and they're just kind of middle of the road and boring. But this other photographer had created unique, interesting images, things that people wanted to emulate. And it didn't have to do with the tools that they were using. It was their vision. It was their uniqueness. And maybe that other photographer that called the more famous photographer a hack, maybe they eventually learned that. And maybe they didn't, because some people don't always. So my first rule of you know that you're unique and you're doing something original when you get haters. So when you start finding people that are so passionate about how terrible your work is, you're doing something unique. Getting people to like the work is not hard. Getting people to hate it when it's still good. I mean, if everybody hates your work, then I don't know, maybe we got to rethink it. But if you're doing work that some people really love and then some people really hate and it's divisive, that means you're doing something unique. Many of the photographers, many of the artists that we follow now and everybody universally says, oh, these are great, in their time were hated by, looked down upon other artists, other people at the time. If you're doing something different, if you're breaking the mold, you're going to stand out. People are going to not like you for it. Having haters is the best thing in the world. So all the people that like to hate when I do a video or send me nasty emails, or to my friends who are great photographers, thank you. Thank you very much. That tells us we're doing something unique and interesting. So do something unique. Believe something that only a few people believe. Believe in yourself and make other people believe it by creating unique and interesting images, music, writings, illustrations, whatever it is in you that you need to create. One of the best ways you can support a small podcast like this one is by giving it a rating or a review. If you are listening to it on any of these podcatchers, go ahead and give me a rating, 5 stars ideally, and write a review if you have some time. Every week I will try to read one, and I've got one this week from Kevin from Apple Podcasts, United States. Fireside chat, 5 stars. Down to earth, fireside chat. It's like Daniel is in my living room. I really need to keep the doors locked. Yes, well, if you leave your doors open and you have popcorn and some nice ice cream, maybe it was a good movie on, I will come by. No, thanks so much, Kevin. Yeah, I try to do exactly that. One thing that I find, I watch a lot of YouTube, and obviously I have a YouTube channel, is that so many people are like professors or lecturers telling you what to do. I feel like learning is a conversation, and that's what I try to create here. So if you have any questions or comments, or you want your voice on the show, remember that in the description below is a link to the Anchor app. You can send me a voice message up to 1 minute. And you can also send me an email at adoramavoice@gmail.com. You can either attach a voice file or just send me an email and we'll talk. Speaking of that, Mark has sent an email talking about a few different other things. I'm going to go back to AI because I totally skipped it this week because I had that other idea. But he talks about a few other things, so let me read this. Photo clubs, good news or not? One commercial photographer who does YouTube is strongly against such clubs as it sets his learning and style development back 5 years. If you want a link, I'll send it. Okay, so I have mentioned photo clubs before. I think that community is really important. And I guess I kind of see what somebody could be saying when they say something like that. The thing is this, if you look at so many of these, quote, photo clubs, they might be filled with people that have been doing photography for a long time. Typically, these are like the head of the club or the leaders of the clubs, right? And they are stuck in their ways. This is probably an outdated way to think about how outdated people would be. And I say that because when we think of photo clubs from, let's say, the 80s and 90s, when I was coming up as a commercial photographer, yeah, I mean, if I showed up at one of these photo clubs, they would have been like, "What are you shooting? This is terrible." And it was being published in fashion magazines because they were doing their traditional photography the way they were doing it. They weren't necessarily staying up with what was going on with the times. It's kind of like, this is the tradition and this is how we do it. I have to believe that most photo clubs that you get into through Meetup and things like that are not going to be like that these days. I could be wrong. I am also in New York City where things are, there's a lot more, we'll say, younger blood, not me, but out there that are aware of things going on, right? Because we have our Instagrams, we have our Flickr groups, and we have our Facebook groups, and although that's all full of old people, I guess, you've got all these different groups online that are effectively photo clubs. And what you're really looking for is, like I say, community. And you may find that anywhere. It might be a Discord server. The reality is that what you want to do is interact with other photographers who can give their opinions and their thoughts on your work, and you want to see what other people are doing. This is the reason for the photo club, in my opinion, which ties into something that he's about to ask as well, which is competitions. Good to do or not? I used to joke about that because so many of the people I worked with are filmmakers, and so many of them were like nominated for this, nominated for that. And as a filmmaker, that's super important. When you're trying to shop your film around, you're like, I was nominated for an Emmy, or I won this Emmy, or I did this, or whatever. And that helps you get into doors. I can't say that I've ever got a commercial account or a commercial job because I won a competition. So I used to say, well, I've never won a competition because I don't enter them. And that is true. It depends on the kind of work you do. Sometimes competitions can be great. I know some photographers who I interact with who often enter things, and oftentimes what the winning thing is something like being shown in different galleries in different parts of the country. And this can be super valuable if you're trying to showcase your work, whether it be documentary work that you want to get the word out on certain things you're trying to bring to light, or whether it's art type work and you're trying to sell it basically in galleries. If it's just simply a competition where you get to put a badge on your photo and it costs you $50 per photo to enter, and the judges are not somebody who you've ever heard of before, then, I don't know that I would necessarily see that as a good thing. I think, like most things in life, you got to weigh them. I'll kind of sidestep here and answer in a funny way. I was at a Photo Plus Expo maybe like 3 or 4 years ago, and I saw this photographer, a pretty successful photographer that works a lot in magazines and stuff, and they were there and they had their portfolios. And I was like, "Oh, you brought your portfolio to Photo Plus?" And they were like, "Oh yeah, I'm having a portfolio review." And I kind of like, you could see I had kind of a baffled look on my face. I'm thinking, this is an established photographer. Why are they having a portfolio review? And again, not to say that you shouldn't have people look at your work, but typically once you're out there and you're working a bunch, you have peers that can look at it. Like I could ask one of my friends to give me an honest review, and they hopefully would. But anyways, what he said was, well, I looked at the review staff and there was 2 magazine editors who I want to work with and I've never been able to get a meeting with. So this way I'm going to get my book in front of them. So you could look at competitions the same way. If there's a gallery you've been trying to get into, or there's somebody you want to get your work in front of and they're a judge in the competition, that could be super useful. Just as an accolade to get work, I would say not great. An accolade to say, hey, I won this competition. Sure, why not? It's always cool to say you won something, right? So I don't think competitions are necessarily bad. I don't think critiques are bad. I don't think photo clubs are bad. I think that what we want to do is take everything, as they say, with a grain of salt. If you go into a photo club and it's full of a bunch of, older people or people that seem to be more, we'll say, classic or traditional in their ways, and you're doing something more modern and they poo-poo it, well, that might be good, right? You might look at it like, it's like if you were a punk band and you showed up at a classical music, record label and they hated it. Well, that's probably good, right? So, I don't know. I mean, maybe if you want to send me the link, I guess my general feeling on life, and maybe people are getting this from listening to this podcast, is that I don't like to watch negative stuff. I almost always avoid videos that say things like, don't do this, you're ruining this is the worst. Even though I know those videos get a lot of views and I know that people like them and shock and blah, blah, blah. I have enough negativity in the world, looking at the newspaper. So I don't need to watch a video about why things aren't good. I think that photo clubs can be good. I think you need to be wary of what clubs you join, right? So if you go into, and also understand that any club you join, there's going to be the established kind of foundation of people and you're going to be an outsider at first. So you've got to kind of go in and feel it out and see if it's someplace you want to be before you put too many cards into that. I don't know if cards, I'm mixing my metaphors, but you know what I'm saying there. I mean, I've done plenty of portfolio critiques and things. And when somebody comes and stands in front of me and I do a critique of their work, if I don't give you a good critique, you shouldn't just like throw away your portfolio and stop working. I'm just one person and that's just my opinion. And it doesn't matter how much experience I have. I'm not hiring you anyways. But that at the same time, don't just be like, well, that's just one person's opinion. You have to look at it like, okay, this is somebody's opinion. Now let me try to open up my eyes and see what they see. If I agree with it, then that's good. And I can make some changes. If I don't agree with it, well, then that's my style and I'll keep going. Because in order to be unique, you're going to stand out. You're going to be different. And like I mentioned, you're going to have haters. Adorama supports this podcast, and you can support them by going to adorama.com and picking up any of your photo, video, audio, or computer needs. Also check out adorama.com/create no matter what for all the cool contests they have going on. I want to thank everyone for listening. Thanks to Mark for his email. You too can email me by sending an email to adoramavoice@gmail.com. Link in the description. You can either just write one out or you can attach a voice message. Also, if you want to send a voice message, you can use the Anchor app. Again, link in the description. Thanks, Kevin, for the great review. And thank you guys just for continuing to listen. The podcast is growing. Please share it if you know anybody who is interested in the arts or just wants something to listen to on their way to work. We're always trying to get out in front of new people. This stage of growing the podcast is always a tricky one. I've reached out to a lot of the people that already follow me in other platforms, but now we're getting new followers. So thank you. If you've never followed me anywhere else and you're just finding this podcast, chime in, send me an email, let me know, how did you find it? Because I would love to keep growing and getting in front of more and more people. And I'll talk to you soon.